I remember those days when I was in St. Louis and in Denver, and even in LA, actually, on those really, really cold nights when you'd get a homeless person or another person would come in as a patient and they would be found down and they would have no heartbeat, no signs of life. And the bottom line is we needed to heat them up slowly. But hypothermia is a thing. And while I live in Bombay now, where it's basically the tropics and you don't really get cold weather, many parts of India in the north have very cold weather. And globally, where I've grown up and in other spots, there is a lot of cold weather. So I wanted to go over some things to prevent hypothermia. Hey guys, Dr. Nene here. I practice as a cardiothoracic, vascular, and general surgeon, and I'm now a health tech innovator who wants to improve lifespans and lifestyles. So stay healthy, stay curious, and keep watching. First of all, what is hypothermia? It's when your body starts to decrease from its basal temperature of 98.6. And there's phases in that. When it goes down to the 30s and the 40s Fahrenheit, you start to have heart arrhythmias and your heart can even stop. And so you never want to get down. And even further up than that, it can happen. But the idea is a few key points for this. Number one, 30% of your blood flows through your head. And the bottom line is if you cover your head with a hat or ideally a nice insulated hood piece, you will prevent that heat loss and that will save you from getting in trouble. No doubt, when your body gets cold, several mechanisms take place and your splanchnic beds are the ones which need to be perfused, meaning your heart, your lungs, your kidneys, and your brain need to get that blood flow. What the body does as a compensatory effect is it shuts down blood flow to the periphery. So what you'll notice is your fingers might go white, your toes might go white, they may lose sensation, even your ears, which really don't have great blood flow, particularly the cartilage, can get frostbite. So the idea is to make sure that you don't suffer from that by, number one, insulating your core, which is your splanchnic beds, your heart and whatnot, covering up your head, and then at the same time wearing mittens and socks and other things. The third thing is layering. Layering in any type of hypothermia situation is critical. What do I mean by that? It's not just a matter of having underpants on. It's a matter of having under gear on. When we went skiing and did other things, we would wear 3 or 4 layers by the time you got done, and each layer had an insulation value. In doing that, you prevent heat loss. And the added benefit is when you go from cold to hot, you don't bake because you can take down some of those layers. So the innermost layer would be some type of layer which generally was either cotton or it had a cotton polyester blend, but it would soak up any moisture or perspiration so that you didn't cool down. The second layer would be another layer above it, which was cotton or wool, and would consist of just regular clothes. Then you would have some type of sweater, and then over that you would have some type of heavy weather gear in the way of, on the top, a winter jacket, and then on top we would wear some type of balaclava or wear a beanie or something like that. Even hats help. I always found my nose and my lips and my ears were the ones which got cold. So the balaclava helped me when I would go skiing and things like that. But in India, I think the key is to wear these monkey caps or to wear something, and even a scarf, which is very common, is tremendous because as the wind kicks up, the temperatures are dropping and the temperature on your skin goes down dramatically. What can happen if you don't do that? Well, the ultimate thing is you can pass away from it. And that was always one of those situations where we just shuddered when someone would come in. And the interesting part is you can't call them gone until you've heated them up, because there were some cases where you would heat up their core temperatures with either warm baths or things like that, or through, in the worst case, intracorporeal perfusion, meaning we would put them on bypass pump and use a blood heater and slowly warm them up. In those cases, once the core temperature comes up to a certain point, the heart starts beating. Coincidentally, that's also what we did when we put them on deep hypothermic circulatory arrest when we were operating on their brains, and we needed to close down the complete blood flow. So there is a precedent there in the worst cases, but you never want to get to that. The other side problems you can have from the cold are frostbite. And that's what happens when you get very poor blood flow to your periphery and to your fingertips and to your toes and to your nose and ears. And it can result in ischemic damage, meaning from the poor blood flow, the cells can start to die and you can actually lose the tips of your fingers, the tips of your nose, the ear, and the toes. And you see this a lot in mountain climbers. The guys who go up Everest often will complain of frostbite, even though they're well insulated and well dressed with the wind chill and other things. So you got to be aware of that. The fifth thing is stay hydrated. Make sure that you have adequate volume on board to pump all the blood everywhere. The fifth is stay away from alcohol, because alcohol gives you a false warmth, which actually isn't warm because it's vasodilating your beds. And in the process, you might actually be losing more heat. So don't go hitting the bottle because you're cold, it doesn't work. And then the last thing is try to be preemptive. When you know there's a cold spell coming on, try to schedule your activities so A, you're dressed properly, but more than that, avoidance, right? Stay indoors if you can, work from home, use Zoom, whatnot. If you have to be out, take the precautions. Keep all of your things available so that if you need to make a run to the market or do something, that they are there. One thing I didn't mention is if your things get wet, dry them, because wet clothes, particularly the ones on your innards which are sweat-filled, can actually keep your body core temperature low artificially. And so if you dry those off, you can be that. Anyway, hypothermia is a thing, and it can be deadly in the worst cases. In the best cases, which aren't so good, you can end up with frostbite, and in the perfect cases, you don't get any of this. The idea is to prevent it so it never happens. Make sure that you take care and plan properly. Look at the weather. Make sure that wherever you're going, you have adequate hydration, adequate warm liquids, and other things. We'll talk about this at greater length. Now, what can you do if you get hypothermic and you've come in from the cold and you don't have all of this stuff? So some of the things that we used were warm baths. Those work very, very well. Obviously, warm clothes, blankets, all of that will insulate you and allow your own body temperature to heat you back up. There's this one thing where, you know, if you were caught outside with other people, you could actually come together and huddle, and that would not only protect you against the wind and the elements, but it would also use each other's body temperature to keep you warm. It's a great way of socializing too. But the bottom line is you have to do that if you get caught out and you have no other way to stay warm. The warm baths, you want to make sure that they're not so hot that you're going to get burned. And why that's important is if you've lost sensation to your fingertips or your toes, you need to have someone else test that water so you don't get burned. The other thing is you don't want to be there for a long period of time, lest you end up in trouble. But the idea is to gradually bring that temperature back up, not suddenly, because if you put it in hot water, it's going to hurt. And that's about it. So I know winter season's on for a lot of you guys. Protect against hypothermia because it can be deadly, and plan ahead, wear the appropriate clothing, and make sure that you don't get exposed inadvertently by not thinking ahead. One other thing I didn't add, a lot of us travel these days in cars, buses, mass transit. Keep a jumper on you and keep some type of sweater or scarf with you, because you never know when the weather is going to change. I remember in St. Louis, if you didn't like the weather, you just waited a little while and it would change to something else. We basically got the 4 seasons in one day sometimes. In Denver, it was less the case, but the bottom line is it could happen. And in northern India, I think this time of year in Delhi and during the day it's 11, by night it drops to 2. And if you go farther out to Himachal Pradesh or you go to the Ladakh or something like that, it's downright cold. So take care, stay warm, and join us for the next episode. Hit like, subscribe, and share, and we'll kind of swap stories together. Make sure you leave the comments down below if you have any questions about what we've said. And we leave links in this on how to deal with hypothermia and what the consequences are and why it occurs. Thanks for joining us.